We think of death as inevitable, as a certainty. But for millions of years, the creatures that walked this earth, our ancestors among them, did not know the meaning of the word. They knew cold, they knew pain, they knew absence. A creature was here, and then it was not. But it was only a shift in the survival math, until one day, 100,000 years ago, that math changed forever. The difference. This isn't just a story about losing an elder. This is the moment a terrifying, abstract idea was born in the human mind. An idea that turned us from simple animals who died into creatures who knew they would die. And that realization would change everything about who you are, what you believe, and why you fear the dark. The status quo. We are among a small, fragile tribe of early Homo sapiens. Their lives are a constant calculation of risk versus reward. An injury, a sudden illness, a blizzard, these are threats to the tribe's survival. When the elder, Uman, collapsed, the tribe felt the pragmatic loss of a leader, a memory keeper. They reacted as any other primate would, with confusion and a quick assessment of resource loss. The body was simply a problem for the immediate future. But ask yourself this: what does a being do when its alpha, its heart, becomes motionless? They nudge it. They move it. They wait for it to get up. For hours they waited. They had no word for corpse. They had no concept of soul. The body simply wouldn't respond to the primal commands of life. And as the day turned into a second night, the absence became something heavier, something deeply, profoundly wrong. We're about to show you the key visual clue that separated them from us: the terrifying stillness. The body started to change. A strange rigidity set in. Worse, the predators, the hyenas and scavenging birds, were drawn to the scent. This was the first true dilemma. In the animal kingdom, a body is a meal, a resource. But this was Uman. This was family. To abandon him was to reject the fundamental bond of the tribe. Yet, to stay was to risk the entire group being hunted by the scavengers drawn to the dead meat. The new fear. The tribe had always known fear, the sharp terror of the chase. But this was a new, cold fear. It was fear of a condition. Fear that this stillness, this cold rigidity was contagious. They looked at Uman and realized they could not protect him. They looked at each other and realized they could not protect themselves from this. The question shifted from how do we survive to how do we survive this? The choice was made. They had to leave Uman. But they couldn't just walk away. The pragmatic action, abandonment, was battling the deep, evolving social instinct to honor and protect. They moved the body away from the immediate campsite, covering it clumsily with branches and heavy stones, trying to hide him from the sky and the scavengers. It was a gesture of respect, a primitive, tearful goodbye that they didn't yet know how to name. The tribe moved on, but the idea of Uman remained. The young hominid, the main character, began to be haunted. They saw Uman in their sleep, standing up, healthy, speaking. This was the first time the human mind was able to separate the body from the person. The birth of the soul. But in waking life, the hole Uman left was a massive, unfillable void. Where did Uman go? The answer would force them to invent their own reality. The terrible truth. The realization spread through the tribe slowly, like a chill on the darkest night. It wasn't just Uman who was gone. The power that made him Uman, the warmth, the breath, the spirit, was a fragile, temporary guest. They looked at their own hands, their own beating hearts, and saw a timer set to 0. This is the birth of personal mortality. The animal only fears the present predator. The human now feared its own future. Imagine the silence of that realization. Before this moment, you worried about being eaten. Now you realize your fate is sealed regardless of the predators. You are guaranteed to become still, cold, and rigid. This fear, this profound existential dread, required an equally profound psychological defense. If you have ever mourned a loss, the next minute explains why we feel that deep void. The defense mechanism. To combat the terror of meaninglessness, the human brain began to invent meaning. They started to remember Uman not just for his utility, but for his being. They began to tell stories about him, exaggerating his strength, emphasizing his wisdom. This wasn't factual reporting, this was mythology in the making. They were trying to resurrect Uman through memory, ensuring his absence was not total. The first art. This mental shift manifested physically. The tribe returned to the burial site, but this time their actions were deliberate. They used ochre, red earth, to mark the burial plot. Red, the color of life, of blood, of the fire they sought. They placed his favorite tools, a sharpened spear, and some newly gathered flowers. Why would they bury tools he could no longer use? Because the goods weren't for the body, they were for the idea of Uman. They were for the journey they imagined he was now taking. The final separation. The burial was the true turning point. It wasn't an act of survival, it was an act of culture. It was an act of faith. By refusing to let Uman's essence simply vanish, they invented a secondary existence. They invented the concept of the spirit, of a life that continues after the body fails. This required complex, abstract thinking, a cognitive leap that placed us outside the chain of nature. From this day forward, humans had a past to honor and a destination to prepare for. The cost of hope. But this spiritual victory came with a cost. By inventing the afterlife, they invented sin, guilt, and the fear of an angry, unseen world. Their entire social structure was now governed not just by what worked for survival, but by what would ensure a safe journey to the next place. The simple world of tooth and claw was replaced by the complex world of gods, demons, and rituals. They became bound by rules they could not see, all in an effort to conquer the fear of the unseen ending. But how did they conquer the very real, practical fear? The answer is revealed in our next section. The knowledge of death fueled every subsequent human innovation. They sought warmer caves, not just for heat, but for sanctuary. They invented better tools and social structures, not just to live longer, but to earn the right to a better afterlife. They made art, painting the walls of their caves to leave a record, to declare, "I was here," defying the very stillness that had terrified them. The burial of Uman led directly to the first villages, the first religions, and the birth of philosophy itself. Look at the nearest cemetery. Look at a church, a mosque, or a temple. Look at the monument built to someone you love. Every single structure, every prayer, every ritual is an echo of that terrifying, beautiful moment 100,000 years ago, when a small tribe looked at a motionless body and asked the first great human question: what happens now? That question is the foundation of our entire civilization. If you want to see the next terrifying step in human evolution, the moment they finally conquered the cold, check out our next video. Thank you for watching.